Hello everyone and welcome to this, a brand new SSTO video, which it's very exciting to be back behind the wheel of a space plane. It's been a little while since I've made one of these things, so what better way to celebrate a return to form than with this mission here, which is I'm surprised that it's not really, well, it's not something that people do a lot, and that is of course sending an SSTO to Tylo's surface, planting a flag and returning without any mining whatsoever. Now, you see, there are two ways of doing Tylo SSTOs in Kerbal Space Program. An SSTO in the traditional sense of landing the whole space plane on the celestial body and then returning the whole thing back to Kerbin. It's not possible to do with Tylo without mining. Unfortunately, all the stock parts, they're just, the way the game is balanced, it's just not possible. I mean, you can do it with mods, but sadly, it's not possible in stock. So there are two ways in which people do Tylo SSTOs. Either they build just a big SSTO that refuels itself with a drilling unit on the surface of Tylo, and then with its fuel tanks refilled, it can easily get back to Kerbin. Bradley Wistons did an excellent video of a ship designed in this way. And then the second method of doing a Tylo SSTO is to just kind of build a simple space plane that goes to Tylo, can get into low Tylo orbit, and then deploys a separate lander that then lands on Tylo, and then the lander then returns to the SSTO, and the whole thing kind of goes back to Kerbin. So the lander doesn't have any staging on it, so this whole mission will be completely recovered, which I think a fully recovered Tylo mission in itself is quite impressive anyway. And I think it's just a nice icing on the cake that it happens to be an SSTO setup as well. I was surprised, kind of said earlier, that I was surprised that no one else has really done it this way. I saw one other video on YouTube of an SSTO setup similar to this, and that it's a Tylo SSTO mission with a separate lander by Daniel Kim. It was a pretty good video. So that's the only incident I've seen of someone doing a mission like this. I thought, there's a gap in the market that I could fill, and it's something, like I say, it's something I've wanted to do for a little while. I kind of had this idea to do a similar thing again, but for Eve, that's how I could have the title Eve SSTO without mining. But like, people always ask me to make Eve SSTOs. That's really the only way of doing it without mining. So that's all the introductions aside. I didn't talk too much about the ascent profile of this space plane because I'm guessing most of you are familiar with my channel by now and have probably heard me discussing flying space planes to death at this point, so didn't really feel much need to talk about it. One little quirk with this particular space plane, you can't really see it just yet, but on the right-hand side of the space plane, I actually forgot to enable symmetry on the shock cone intakes. So you can see that fuel tank there where the solar panels are attached. There's no shock cone there. That didn't get destroyed or anything like that. I legitimately forgot to turn on symmetry for one of the intakes. So that's why you may notice later on in the video when I'm around Tylo, you can kind of see it there, but it's very obvious when you're around Tylo, there's a bit missing there. I did check the footage. It didn't explode at any point. I just didn't add it. So that's a little quirk of this SSTO. Some of you may notice its similarities, well, it shares the same name as well, as the space plane I used to put the first module of the Collaboration Station project into orbit around the Mun. This is kind of just a modified version of that SSTO. So it still carries the same name, the Besant, which is kind of what I give to my cargo SSTOs. I don't have many. I think I've done... this is the third cargo SSTO I've made now. But yeah, so I just shrunk down the cargo bay because that one had a really, really long interior for a bigger payload, whereas this one doesn't need quite as big a space inside. And it carries a little bit less fuel, I believe, as well, to account for the fact it doesn't need to carry as big of a cargo space. So, for those who are curious about what's happening on screen at this point, the way we're getting to Jool is not by just doing a conventional burn at Kerbin to get our apoapsis all the way up to the green planet in one boost. Unfortunately, we probably do have enough fuel to do it that way, but we'll be pushing our budget very tight. It's far more efficient to do it this way, where we're going to be doing a gravity assist off Eve, that then flings us around the sun and then joins us, and then we meet Kerbin again. We do a slingshot off Kerbin to get our orbit nice and high, and then we drop all the way back down to swing past Kerbin once more to boost our apoapsis up all the way to Jool. And my execution of this gravity assist setup was pretty terrible, actually. I had to do several correction burns. In the long run, I probably didn't end up saving that much. I mean, it was still more efficient than doing the burn at Kerbin periapsis direct to Jool, but it wasn't a very efficient flight. So I have done this method of getting to Jool in a couple of other videos, in my SSTO to Lathe and Elu, my 60-seat Elu SSTO, and my 124-seat Lathe SSTO, all of which can be found in my SSTO playlist that will be on the screen at the end of this video. That used a similar kind of Eve, Kerbin, gravity assist sequence to get to Joule in a much better execution than this video. So I wouldn't use this video as a guide particularly. But that's just what I'm doing in case people weren't familiar with the setup here. And there you go. Those are our gravity assist of Kerbin just there. We're going to have to do one more final gravity assist to get ourselves up to Joule. At this point, I actually had a bit of a... I don't know, it was a bit annoying because the way I'd done all my gravity assist and plots, I hadn't really got myself on a very good trajectory. But I wanted to get this video done, and I knew I had enough delta V to kind of account for some mistakes. So like, you know what, we'll just do a kind of subpar gravity assist that doesn't quite get us all the way to Joule, and we'll just do a quick burn as we pass our Kerbin periapsis during the gravity assist, because it's not going to cost very much because we're going to be traveling very fast as we pass Kerbin's periapsis, so it won't be a very expensive burn, and we can just get the last of our apoapsis raising done there. So there we go. I feel like we're now quite far into the video. It's just past the 6-minute mark. But in case some of you are getting bored and have noticed that there is still quite a significant amount of time to go, there is a music video for this particular mission, as is the case with a lot of my SSTO missions and just general missions in general. But if you want a more abridged version of this video, there is a link in the description and of course on screen at the end of this video, which takes you to a music video of this mission. The music video isn't monetized by me. It will probably have adverts on it because it uses copyrighted music, but I don't make it. I don't see any of that money. And it does have songs by 2 artists, so I will probably have sort of inadvertently done a Jimquisition style copyright deadlock on that, so maybe there won't be any ads. Whew, this is exciting, isn't it? I have no idea. You guys will have to let me know. But yes, that's in the description. I feel like I've talked about this long enough. And there we go. There's our... Well, we're not... Our trajectory isn't there yet, but we're just planning our maneuver node to get ourselves on a trajectory that takes us straight into Joule. I did do a lot of cutting out, sort of playing around with maneuvers. There we go, we got a nice encounter there. So we'll just sort of play around with the maneuver node to try and get ourselves on a Tylo encounter. I can probably cut a lot of this out because there's a lot of trial and error. When you're doing this, if you want to sort of meet Tylo in the best place, you want to be getting it sort of as close to your periapsis point as possible, and your periapsis just sort of kisses Tylo's orbit in the way you just saw there. Now, we're going to be doing our circularization around Joule using a Tylo gravity assist, so thereby not needing to expend any fuel to get ourselves captured around Joule. As I'm sure you can start to see a pattern emerging here for any kind of big interplanetary SSTOs to the Joule system and beyond, gravity assists are the way to go. They save a hell of a lot of fuel. So, not much more to say about that really, but there you go. You can see our orbital trajectory has swung in. There we go. So we're going to be doing one gravity assist to get ourselves into Joule orbit and kill off a lot of our speed, and then we're going to just swing around and encounter Tylo again, and it'll be a cheaper burn to circularize at Tylo at that point because we'll have kind of killed off a lot of our orbital velocity during the first gravity assist. And there's the green monster there in the background, and there of course is Tylo. So as you can see, there's Lathe as well. Lathe and Joule look particularly nice in my particular version of the game. I'm using the graphics mods I'm using are Scatterer, that's for the atmospheric scatter and cool oceans on Kerbin, and yeah, obviously all the planets with atmospheres really, so Joule included. I'm using the stock visual enhancements config files. So the way you install it is you put environmental visual enhancements in your mod folder, and then you add the files that come with stock visual enhancements, and together they form a beautiful visual mod. And then I've also got I was about to say I've got Scatterer running as well, but I said I've got Scatterer, haven't I? So that's it for the visual mods, I think. Oh, actually, I've got stock visual terrain enhancement. I think that's what it's called. If you Google those exact words, you'll probably come up with the mod in Google. And then obviously the other mods are better burn time, better time warp. I always call it better burn time, I don't know why, because it's better time warp. And obviously Kerbal Engineer readouts at the top of the screen, and then you can even see the total delta V readout there on the top right as well. It's a little bit misleading at the moment because we have a lander stage in there, so technically that's not really our true total delta V, but it's, for all intents and purposes, it's close enough, and when we've used the lander, it will be pretty accurate. So we're going to be doing, like we did with Kerbin, we did multiple burns at Kerbin to raise our apoapsis, because of course it is more efficient to burn at periapsis. So we're going to do several burns at Tylo periapsis to bring our orbit nice and down. As you can see, it takes a lot of fuel to land at Tylo, just from the fact we're having to do multiple burns to get circularized. It has very high gravity. It's slightly lighter, and like its mass is slightly less than that of Kerbin, but for practical purposes it's the same as Kerbin. But what makes it especially challenging is the fact that it doesn't have any atmosphere, so whereas Kerbin, and I guess Eve, and Juna as well, and Lathe, they're dead easy to land on, because although they're very heavy planets and have a very high mass, you can just use the atmosphere to slow stuff down. I use parachute, heat shields, all that good stuff. Tylo, on the other hand, is a different beast entirely, because Tylo has no atmosphere, and that's the challenge of Tylo, really. That's why I've been going to Tylo quite a lot recently. It's been a fun challenge, building crafts that can go to Tylo. So Tylo's kind of, it's the hardest place in the game to land on, basically, except for Jewel, I suppose, if we're being technical, because you can you still land on Jewel? I think you technically can, but it's very difficult and glitchy, and you're not really supposed to be able to. So let's just say you can't. So there's our lander there. It actually did end up looking fairly similar to Daniel Kim's, but I actually designed this before I knew he'd made a video, so I guess great minds think alike. But yeah, it just consists of these it's a very lightweight design, because obviously one of the objectives I had for this mission was to have it fully recoverable, which means that this thing can't drop any stages, which is usually essential for any kind of Tylo lander, because like I say, it takes a lot of delta V to land on Tylo. It takes about 2,300 meters per second of delta V to land on Tylo, and since there's no atmosphere, it takes the same amount of fuel to take off, and it takes the same amount of fuel to land on Tylo as it does to take off from Tylo. So if you have a lander that's got about 5,000 meters per second of delta V, it should be that should be good for Tylo. And 5,000 delta V is quite a tall order for a single stage. Luckily, because there's an atmosphere, we can use the very efficient engines, and of course aerodynamics is not really something we have to think about, so we can make a pretty unaerodynamic lander. And there we go. So Jeb gracefully disembarks from his lawn chair at the top of that rocket stack, and he can quickly plant his flag, which isn't really much to look at, because I give all my ships names, and then the flag is just the text, so that the name of the ship is on the side of the ship, a bit like where the space shuttle names are. There's like, it says on the side of the space shuttle what ship it is, like, the Challenger and Endeavour and Atlantis. You know what the space shuttle is, right? So without wasting any time, let's just launch straight away. Unlike Kerbin, we don't really need to be launching too far ahead of the target, because we'll accelerate to full speed very quickly, because there's no atmosphere to slow us down, and we don't have to get to a very high altitude before focusing on our horizontal velocity. So we can pretty much start burning flat straight away, and I'm just keeping an eye on the time to apoapsis thing in the Kerbal Engineering readouts at the top left, trying to sort of keep that below 1 second, and then that's kind of the most efficient way, because then you're spending as much fuel as possible on bringing up your horizontal and therefore your orbital velocity, and not wasting too much of it on vertical speed. And there we go. Our periapsis is above the surface, but to raise it to a safe height, we'll just do a very, very minor burn at Tylo apoapsis. And then, well, I mean, in theory, we do have a pretty close encounter with the mothership anyway, and we could probably get our encounter just using the lander. But since we only have about 40 meters per second delta V left over, I thought it might be a more sensible idea to do the most of the rendezvousing. Is that the right verb? Rendezvousing. Yeah, most of the rendezvous maneuvers and encountering with the space plane, because it just has a bit more fuel to play around with. So here we are, just switching vessels, making our maneuver node, and then swinging ourselves around to get ourselves a nice close approach. I didn't bother. I mean, I probably should have, because this is a mission in which fuel is quite tight, but I didn't really bother making this a particularly efficient encounter. I just got it roughly close, within 5 kilometers, then just killed off all my speed relative to the target. I actually overshot it just there, but yeah, kill off all our speed relative to the target, and then just start burning towards it again. And you can just see there, the encounter nose swinging right around. We have a separation of less than 100 meters. And, yep, totally missed the window in which we should have started burning, but it wasn't a big deal because, well, sorry, that was my phone. Ignore that. But yeah, not much more to say about that really, so we can just open up our cargo bay there. The bay doors don't open fully because I didn't want them to clip through any of the fuel tanks, although we do have that kind of asymmetrical fuel tank design there, just to make sure that the fuel, in practical sense it doesn't matter because there's no collision on those bay doors, but at least not when it comes to opening through other parts, but I wanted it to look kind of, you know, somewhat realistic. So I kind of made the upper fuel tanks shorter than the lower ones to account for the fact that bay doors have to open, and there's lots of clearance between the doors and the shock cones. Yeah, so we can do our final little burns into the actual bay itself using the lander, and just quickly use the monopropellant on the space plane to move it into a slightly better position. But because this thing's so light and the SAS wheels are quite, you know, powerful, the magnets of the and we can use the magnets inside the docking ports, it wasn't really too difficult. And I do have those kind of guide rails, I guess, you know, those structural panels in there just to, you know, just for the thing to rest on, so it won't fall too far down into the cargo bay, if that makes sense. But yes, now Jebediah is back inside the cockpit of the plane. We can begin to get back home, and I knew the mission was over. It was going to be fine at this point because we've got 1800, almost 1900 meters per second of delta V, which is more than enough to get back from the dual system. Obviously, it's going to take a significant amount of fuel to leave Tylo, because Tylo takes a lot of fuel to get to and takes a lot of fuel to leave. But once we've kind of got our Tylo escape, we're going to have loads and loads of fuel left over. So it's not, I wasn't worried about efficiency at all. So I mean, we can do 2 burns at periapsis to have the most efficient exit, but I wasn't too worried about having enough fuel to get back home at this point. We've got about 1000 meters per second of delta V. For reference, my 124 seat Lathe SSTO, I believe, from low lathe orbit had about 800 meters per second, and obviously we're now in a very high elliptical dual orbit. So, you know, I knew I've done this before with less fuel, so I perhaps wasn't as efficient as I could have been here, but I didn't care. So this is kind of my preferred method of leaving the dual system efficiently. I don't think anyone else actually does it this way though, because it's probably not technically the best, but it's the easiest for me at least. I like to do, well, in this case, we're leaving from Tylo, so I didn't need to do a Tylo gravity assist. But if I'm leaving Lathe, I'll do a Tylo gravity assist into a high elliptical orbit, and then do another gravity assist to finally exit from dual. I find it much easier to get a periapsis that's close to Kerbin's level doing it this method. Well, I didn't quite make it that time. I had to do a very short burn as we passed Tylo on our gravity assist, just to do the last of the, you know, lowering of the periapsis. But it wasn't a very expensive burn. Look at that, we still got 900 meters per second, give or take. So we got loads of fuel. Wasn't an issue. So we're just going to make sure we're going to encounter Kerbin here, because if we encounter Kerbin at this point, unfortunately, we're going to be going far too fast to safely either aero brake, and we don't have enough fuel to circularize at that speed. So we're going to be doing a gravity assist past Kerbin. Obviously, we did a gravity assist before from Kerbin to raise our orbit's height. We can do the same thing again. We can use a gravity assist from Kerbin to lower our orbit's height. Just depends on which side of the planet you pass by. So there we go. We've got our final orbit nice and low. We don't actually want that particular orbit though, because you can see it's quite eccentric. You want your orbital periapsis to kind of sort of kiss Kerbin's orbit, if that makes sense. There's probably a proper geometric term for that, but you know, you don't want to be crossing over Kerbin's orbit, because then you're going to be your relative velocity is going to be quite low. So I thought, I've got enough fuel. We can just, I know our apoapsis is low enough now where re-entry heat's probably not going to be an issue, so I just used some fuel to get our periapsis raised so that it would be kind of passing along Kerbin's orbit. We won't be crossing over Kerbin's orbital path very much, so our relative velocity to the planet is not going to be too high, so re-entry heating shouldn't be a problem. And then we're going to do some quick correctional burns here. not much avail, it was just time warping. There we go. So yeah, do a few correctional burns to make sure we're getting sort of roughly equatorial and fairly close to the planet. But yeah, I think the problem with this mission is that obviously my execution of the burns wasn't fantastic. Like, there are far better examples of how to do this mission more efficiently than what you're seeing in this video. The reason for this is that I make it difficult for myself because I am very insistent on not using mods for that sort of thing. Obviously, I've got visual mods because they don't affect the gameplay. And actually, just very quickly here, I'm doing this big crazy roll to just evenly distribute the heat to ensure that we don't explode. This video has been sped up quite a bit to bring the time down as fast as possible. And obviously, we're doing time warp as well, so it wasn't quite as extreme as it looks in this footage here. We actually got an accidental Mun gravity assist, so we're going to be actually leaving Kerbin, but it won't take very much fuel just to bring it down a little bit. So we'll just do a quick retrograde burn to ensure that we're not going to be ejected from the Kerbin system again. And there we go, beautiful. So as I was saying, yeah, I mean, if you have the ability to have mods, I would recommend you get the mod Precise Node. That's pretty much needed to do the kind of an efficient version of the Eve Kerbin gravity assist sequences to duel, and of course any subsequent gravity assists you want to do in the mission as well. I'm told Precise Node is pretty much essential. I've choose to just never use it because then I don't know what I'm missing out on, and people often tell me in the comments that they play on PlayStation and Xbox, and obviously you can't have mods on those, so I want to be able to at least showcase that this mission is possible without mods. Obviously you've got Kerbal Engineer readouts at the top. That's just to makes things easier, really. I mean, all the values from Kerbal Engineer are in-game. I mean, admittedly, you would have to calculate delta V by hand, but I mean, once you've got the formula, it's pretty easy to just punch in the liquid fuel levels. It just makes it a bit easier, a bit more convenient, and also because if you're trying to recreate this mission yourself or do something similar, you have this video as a reference to, you know, compare what my fuel levels were like at different parts of the mission. So Kerbal Engineer makes it's a bit more convenient, but ultimately it doesn't add anything that wasn't in the game to begin with, whereas Precise Node actually does physically improve an aspect of the game. And so I like showcasing that you don't necessarily need it, because I understand that some people can't run mods. So that's my recommendation. If you want to try this mission, I'm told the Precise Node, and you know, whenever you see other people doing the Kerbin gravity assist sequences, they all generally use Precise Node, but I didn't, so don't worry if you don't have that mod. You don't really need it, but you're not going to be as efficient. I mean, maybe you could be if you had a bit more patience than I, but we're coming into Kerbin now on our final entry, and I was fine being a bit more inefficient than I perhaps could have been. So I actually realised, I saw the mountains on the left there and realised I was probably going to overshoot, so I started doing this roll to try and create as much drag as possible. And then I decided, oh look, the islands are there. We could just land at the island runway, because I don't land there very often, and neither does anyone else on YouTube. And it's actually a little bit harder to land on than the KSC runway, because obviously it's on that tiny little island, there's a big mountain next to it. Well, admittedly the KSC runway also has the vehicle assembly building to the right, but you get what I mean. It's a bit harder to, you know, navigate to, and it's shorter as well, and it's a bit narrower, so it's a little bit more treacherous, and you know, it's a little bit different. It's a different thing to do. I probably didn't have enough fuel to land at the Kerbal Space Center as well from where I am now, so I could have quick loaded and just, you know, been a bit more aggressive with my periapsis height, but I thought this was quite a nice way to end the video, actually, landing at this airfield, because not many people do land here. So that does somewhat change today by me doing this. So yeah, just touching down here, and there we go. Fantastic. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Links to the craft file, as always, are in the description, as well as links to my Twitter, Patreon, Discord, all that. If you want to get in touch with me, either leave a comment below, or like I say, Discord and Twitter are good ways of communicating with me. Discord, I prefer if you message me in the server itself, not via private message, just because then it involves other people in the conversation who might have also wanted to know the same thing you're asking. So that's just a little thing about Discord. And anyway, on screen now, top left is the music video version of this mission. Top right is a full playlist of all my other SSTOs. And bottom right was specially selected by YouTube's algorithm just for you to match your taste. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.